Level up your LA Kings experience with the new Vivid Seats Elite Seats. All the on-ice Kings action with even more exclusive access. Enjoy great seats to the game along with premier dining inside the Lexus Club with all-you-can-eat food and non-alcoholic beverages. Plus, get a free Team LA Kings item and parking with your purchase. Score your Vivid Seats Elite Seats tickets today and earn rewards on each purchase from the only ticket company that rewards you for buying. Experience it live with Vivid Seats, the official partner of the LA Kings.
You're listening to an LA Kings podcast. For more episodes of this and every other Kings program, visit lakings.com/podcast.
Kopitar wins the draw back for Spence. He skates toward the middle, gives it to Fiala to the left and back for Spence, top of the right circle. Back for Fiala, in deep for Kopitar, centering pass, score! Kempe, back post, slid it 5-hole through to Cord. And with 13:53 left in the first, it's 1-1. Another power play goal for the Kings.
You're listening to All the Kings Men, the official podcast of the LA Kings.
Kings force the puck back into the neutral zone, pick it up again, and now Kopitar up the right wing, centers for Turcotte, dropped it back, Kempe scores! Adrian Kempe on the great pass from Turcotte at the near post, across for number...
Now, here's your host, Jesse Cohen.
All right, it is Monday. It's time to crown a King of the Week. We're starting off the second half of the season, more or less, with Austin Stanovich from the Sporting Tribune. How are you doing today, Austin?
I'm doing fantastic, Jesse. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. You should change the little title on your Zoom name, by the way, because I was going into autopilot mode and almost read it out loud, and that is no longer accurate. So you should.
You're right. I should. I
bring
thought
that
I did.
up to date. All right, so 3 games this week to talk about, Austin. The 1-0 shutout against the Edmonton Oilers, the 5-1 win over the Vancouver Canucks, and the 4-2 loss to the Seattle Kraken. So a bit of an odd week. Before we dive into King of the Week talk, let's just take the 5-game road trip in its totality. They go 2-3. Their record against the Pacific is now, 1 game under 500, I think?
Yeah.
I'm finding it really hard to get excited about, in a negative way, about a 2-3 road trip when the team is, virtually unbeaten at home. Which is not to say that people who do get upset about it or who want to point out negative facets of the game, we had this come up on Kings Talk. I'm not trying to yuck anybody's yum when it comes to, criticizing the team. But for me, I just find it really difficult when, like I said, the team's virtually unbeaten at home.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Also, I think to add on to the weirdness of this road trip, you've had the situation going on at home, which these guys are still humans. I'm sure they're thinking about what's happening. Their mind's probably not 100% on hockey, which is always tough when you're playing at this level. I guess if you're off by even a fraction of a percent, other teams can take advantage of it. So it's a very hard road trip to analyze when you put that on top of it, I think.
Your honorable mention this week.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Alex Turcotte. And frankly, that first period against Vancouver alone kind of solidified him into this conversation. And I think this is the second time in, maybe a month and a half that I've been on here with you. And both times I've picked Alex Turcotte, which a testament to what I think of the player, but also how well he's played. I think that the broadcasts before the Seattle game flashed, he has like 10 points in 13 games since going up with Kopitar and Kempe or something like that. I mean, he's really stepped up in a big way. He had that just fantastic game in Vancouver. And what I think we're seeing is a guy who is now showing that he not only can keep up with Kopitar and Kempe from a speed standpoint, from a hockey IQ standpoint, but now has the offense to not necessarily match them, but to capitalize on the situations he gets put in by playing with 2 players like that. And it's a interesting situation for Turcotte because, like most young players, all of their opportunity comes in very high pressure situations, in that you're going to get that chance to play with Kopitar and Kempe because of injury or suspension or illness. In this case, it was an injury to Trevor Moore that bumped him up to that spot for an extended period of time. He had a look at the beginning of the year, but that was kind of what the catalyst for him getting a longer look there. And when you get that, it is, you can't have a bad game. He does not have the luxury of taking a period, a game, maybe even a shift off. He has to be on every single time he touches the ice if he wants to stay in that spot, and he's done that. He's taken advantage of it, and I mean, good on him. And for this team, it's massive to have a guy like Alex Turcotte, cost controlled, a guy that they've put a lot of time into developing, really starting to flourish for him.
I had my three names picked out before we started. I didn't know what order I was going to go in. And so I think I'm going to save Alex Turcotte for later.
Yeah.
For me, I'm going to go with Darcy Kemper in the honorable mention spot because not necessarily through any fault of his own, he winds up with 2 losses out of 3 games.
Yeah.
But he stopped 67 of 72 shots. He has a 9.31 save percentage, a 1.71 goals against average. I don't think any of the goals against him were quote unquote bad goals. I don't feel like he lost. I mean, listen, the Edmonton game was 1-0. And what are you going to do? You know,
Yeah.
the Oilers score at 4-on-4, which I mentioned, I think, in Kings Talk that night. I'll mention it here again. I don't know that a lot of younger fans know this, but the NHL actually tried to get rid of 4-on-4 in the middle of Gretzky's career because Gretzky and Curry were so dangerous at 4-on-4. It just became absurd. And they were like, all right, well, we're not going to do that anymore. And then they put it back in a few years later. But which incidentally, I always want that to come up in the Ovechkin conversation. But regardless. So I'm not going to hang too much blame on Darcy Kemper for the 1-0 loss to the Edmonton Oilers and the 4-2 loss to the Kraken. Listen, he lets one in 30 seconds into the game on a bad turnover, and then that third one just to start the second period. That was it. So I thought he had a real strong week. I thought he's been having a really strong month, 2 months, whatever it is since he's been back. And you know, I've said it time and time again, when the season started, I wasn't sure that you could get 500% increase in value on Darcy Kemper and his contract versus Cam Talbot and his contract from last season. I'm still not sure that it's 500% value, but I definitely don't think that they are getting cheated in any way.
No.
Out of Darcy Kemper's contract and his performance.
No, definitely not. He's been a rock for them. I think Jim Hiller said it a few games ago, and I asked him how they keep finding ways to win games even when they're not at their best, and he said you just got to look at the goalie. And I think that Darcy Kemper has been – we talk a lot about, you know, they just need a goalie that's not going to lose them games because they're so good defensively. He's doing more than that since he came back from that injury, like you said. It's been really impressive to watch him.
I had a moment where I texted some of our mutual compatriots in the media pool thinking I had stumbled onto a stat for Darcy Kemper that was perhaps a bad omen. But then while I was staring at the stat and orienting, you know, the order in which the players are listed, I realized I had it wrong, and it was actually a really incredible stat. I was like, oh, okay, well, never mind. Even when I think I found something that might be scary, it turns out that no, he's good at that too. So that's my honorable mention. Your runner-up, Austin.
Yeah, it was. You know, it's going to be Darcy Kemper.
Yeah,
but now I'm very concerned that we're going to have the same 3 players. So I'm going to change it up for the sake of content, and I'm going to throw Joel Edmondson's name in there.
Oh, okay. Well, I can tell you right now, we don't have the same 3 players.
We don't now, that's for sure.
Yeah.
He led the team with a +3 this week, and I know that a lot of people don't love that stat. I know in this house we respect plus minus, so I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there.
Yeah.
Only 1 assist, but you don't look at Joel Edmondson for offense. The thing that really sticks out for me is the 19-18 average time on ice over the last 3 games, which just makes him this team's number 3 defenseman. And I know you talked to Jim and Nick, what would have been, I think, last week about his role and the fact that if you had told everyone at the beginning of the year he was going to be this team's number 3 defenseman right behind Anderson and Gavrikov, everyone would have called you crazy. And he has stepped in and done very well in that role. He's a big part of that kill that was really important, I think, against Vancouver, and did a good job when they were called upon against Edmonton, which is always a difficult task. I think that Joel Edmondson's a guy that just deserves a lot of credit. He got a lot of heat for that contract when he came in, and he's really, you know, kind of like what you said with Darcy Kemper. I don't know if he's playing at 500% capacity to Cam Talbot. we can talk all we want about whether or not Joel Edmondson playing quote unquote up to his contract. He has been a positive impact on this team so far, and I think that's really all you can ask from for any player. Be a positive impact. He's been that and more, I think.
I'm going to double down on one thing you said. You called him the team's third defenseman. He is unquestionably. He's the team's third player. Like, he's got more minutes than Kopitar and Kempe.
Yeah, that's inflated though by there's less D.
Inflated by whatever you want. It's crazy.
No, yes, yeah, no, 100%. Yes, I agree.
Like, if you had told me in the middle of the summer that Joel Edmondson would be playing the third most amount of minutes, game 42, I wouldn't have believed you, or I would have thought, oh no,
something's gone horribly wrong.
Something has gone horrible. That cannot be a good sign. It's perfectly fine. I don't think people expect it to continue once Drew Doughty returns.
No,
but
also,
who knows
how much? Yeah, I mean, again, you, Nick, and Jim talked about it. What if they don't break up Gavrikov and Anderson and they keep Edmondson up in that top four? It might not. I mean, his minutes will likely go down a bit but he might still be a really major part of this team. And Jim Hiller talked about before, the way that guy kills plays, the way he uses reach, the way he can just slow the game down for this Kings team has been really, really big for them, especially with the way they play. They still want to just muck things up, make things miserable on the opponents, and he is kind of a poster child for that.
And if you want to talk about the offseason and the rhetoric of uncomfortability that was mentioned by the front office, and obviously they went out and they got Jeannot and they got Edmondson, blah, blah, blah. The play that he got injured on, where he jumped up to keep...
God. One of the scariest things I've seen live.
Right? Nothing could be more uncomfortable than that. Yes. And I certainly never thought of something like that when the conversation turned to playing uncomfortably. But if you're Jacob Muvarari, or if you're Jordan Spence, or if you're Alex Turcotte, if you're whoever, and you see Joel Edmondson leaping up on just a routine keep the puck in the zone play, right? He wasn't trying to prevent. I mean, I don't know, maybe it would have been a breakaway or an odd man rush if he hadn't, but I don't think it would have.
No.
But if you see a guy sacrifice his body like that, and then miss 2 or 3 games,
only 2 or 3 games considering what happened.
No, I mean, I think I said it to Zach on some platform somewhere. Like, if that had been me, I just would never get out of bed. I would just spend the rest of my life crying and eating ice cream in bed.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. So I think that's a perfectly fine pick. For my runner-up, I'm going back to Alex Turcotte. Because everything you said, I think, applies. And the one thing that I've noticed in his game is that he's finding ways to extend plays that you would never notice didn't get extended if he didn't extend them. And so the example in this one is the Kempe goal. Or even, you know what? I'll even give him credit for the goal he scored that Kempe passed it to him. He didn't have to go barreling down and crash and be available for that pass. And if he wasn't, how many times have we seen a player gain the zone, be alone, have the puck, have nobody to pass it to, and you just go, oh, well, bad luck, bad timing, whatever. But no, Alex Turcotte barreled in there. He made himself available for the pass, and he buried it. And then later on, right, he gets the puck makes a move. Was it Kopitar that got him to him? And then he passed it behind himself to Kempe, who made a move to score. That's the type of offensive player that I really enjoy watching. And I don't know if it's a fair comparison, but it just reminds me of Tanner Pearson, who would make these little plays where you're like, okay, Victor Arvidsson too, more Danault and Arvidsson, they would play that way, where you're just like, all right, that play could have died and nobody would have thought twice about complaining about it. But that you see that little effort, that secondary vision, whatever you want to call it, and it turns into a goal. So that is my runner-up, is Alex Turcotte. I imagine we have the same King of the Week.
I would think so.
All right, take it away.
It's going to be Adrian Kempe.
Yeah, it is.
It has to be. It has to be. And I think, back to what I said about Turcotte, a testament to what I think of the player and how good he's been, I think I've been on this show maybe 6 or 7 times, and I think all but once he is featured in some way, shape, or form
Yeah.
because he has just been so consistently good for this Kings team for a while now. And I think the most impressive thing about Adrian Kempe to me is the way he has continued to improve and raise his ceiling in a way that I don't think certainly I thought. You know, he had the 35 goal year, and you even had Tom McCollum like, oh, there's a lot of empty netters. He gave away a lot defensively, and then he scores 41. Is a good defensive player. And you're like, well, he only had like 20 assists or whatever. Leads the team in assists last year, and now he's on pace for another 40 goal year. He's, if not a point per game, he's right there. I was looking at a stat earlier. I think he's tied for 12th in the league in goals. And of the guys with equal or more goals than him, Sam Reinhart's the only other one that kills penalties. He's one of the most physical players amongst that group. Like, he just does everything at such a high level for this team. Like, he's not quite in that Nikita Kucherov, Kirill Kaprizov tier of wingers, but he is right behind him. I mean, he is just such a stellar player.
I wonder, though, if he were on a franchise where the identity of the franchise was invested in letting him be that kind of player, if he wouldn't be. Like, again, not to just make everything about Ovechkin and how I don't like him, but one of my arguments over the years has been, everybody says, oh, well, he's got the most goals and blah, blah, blah. And obviously he does. But I would always say, listen, he went to an organization who made it part of their organization's identity that he score a lot of goals.
Yeah.
And so is he incredible? Yes, absolutely. He's a phenomenal player. Yes, absolutely. But had he gone to the LA Kings under Lombardi and Sutter for the years that they were there, or under Blake and McClellan, like, no, I don't think he has that many. Adrian Kempe, sorry, this is about Adrian Kempe, not
no.
Adrian Kempe is just the team's best player right now.
Oh yeah, without. I mean, I don't,
like, it's
all
just,
respect to Andre Kopitar, I don't even think particularly close. And that's what the other point I was going to make, that the offense has dried up in a big. The Vancouver game, notwithstanding, has dried up in a big way the last few games, except Adrian Kempe. I mean, even when the rest of the team is struggling for offense, that guy scores. He creates chances. It's incredible to watch.
The funniest moment of the week, I thought, for me, was there was a moment late in the Seattle game. Adrian Kempe goes to the front of the net. A shot comes in from the point or from the perimeter. He doesn't get a stick on it. The goalie makes the save, and he looks up at the sky as if he was the one who shot it in and didn't get one. And I was like, okay, that's a guy who knows he can score. His pass to Turcotte on the first goal in the Vancouver game, I just thought was so impressive.
Yeah, and, well, I think it's a testament to him too that when he went off in pain in the first shift of the Edmonton game, I mean, how many of us said, "Well, the season might be the season's done if he 100%. Is actually hurt." Like if he had a Doughty type injury, we're all thinking, "Well, pack it up, boys, start selling off the trade deadline because this season is over without that guy because he is that impactful for this hockey team."
Yeah, no, he really is, and I said it on Twitter. The quarter century team for the NHL was scheduled to come out the day of the Calgary game, but it was postponed, as well as the Calgary game because of the fires. That list will ultimately come out, as will my conversation with Jim Fox and Dennis Bernstein about it. And I posted my list, and I have Adrian Kempe on it. And I just said, listen, if you don't have Adrian Kempe on your quarter century team, you are not paying attention.
Yeah.
Or you have a fundamental misunderstanding of how hockey works, because he's just incredible.
Yeah, he's the best winger this team's had since Luke, I think. I mean, I mean, Paulfie's in the conversation, but
did you text me that?
I think I responded to Twitter with that or something.
Okay, so somebody did, and I never got back because I don't know how to. I think I started saying, like, I don't know, because Palfy in my mind is still back when I was just like, oh, these are gods among men, and none of them can do any wrong. Like, I'm sure Bob Kudelski was not the player that my 15-year-old brain turned him into. So when I look back at like Dead Marsh and Palfy and Allison, I'm just like, yeah, those guys are flawless, amazing players, and whatever. But yeah, and the funniest thing to me about Kempe, and this has nothing to do with this week, but it's just about him in general. When he was drafted as a center.
Yeah. Oh, yep.
And they played him at center for a year or two. and
Yep.
they couldn't figure it out. And there was all this talk about what a bum he was and what a bust he was, and it wasn't working, blah, blah, blah. Then they moved him to left wing, and I actually really liked him at left wing with Lizotte and Wagner. I
Hmm.
actually thought that was a really great third line. And I would have been perfectly happy if they kept those three players in those three roles and never made another move. Anyway, he's now a right winger.
Yep.
Like that's where we've come full like
Yeah.
full
One of the
rotation.
funniest things is looking at his like scouting report because
Yeah.
it's big, fast center, limited offense, really good defensively, shutdown guy. Big and fast are maybe the only two things that are stuck with that. I mean,
Yeah.
to think if you told everyone that guy, I mean, maybe Mark Unetti would disagree with this, but if you told everyone that guy was going to turn into a 40 goal, near point per game player, winger at his
Right
draft,
winger.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Everyone would be like, that's insane. And
Yeah.
here we are.
Yeah, exactly. Here we are. So congratulations, Adrian Kempe, this week's King of the Week. Ever wonder what top athletes eat to perform at their best? Superfood Direct, the preferred catering partner of the LA Kings, is here to fuel your game. For athletes, nutrition isn't just fuel, it's the key to peak performance. Superfood Direct delivers chef-prepared meals that help you build strength, boost endurance, and recover faster. With over 11 years of experience, every meal is balanced with the perfect mix of proteins, carbs, and healthy fats to power you on and off the ice. Ready to fuel your greatness? Visit superfd.com/direct and get 20% off your first order with promo code LA20. That's LA20. Austin, do you mind if I keep you on for a few more minutes to talk about the coming week?
Not at all.
All right, so we've got 3 games, Pittsburgh and Florida at home, then Columbus on the road. The Pittsburgh game I'm very curious about because I think a lot of the Seattle game, and I don't know this, I haven't talked to any of the players or coaches, but it kind of sounds like they've echoed this sentiment from what I've heard. Seattle game was like the last of a 5-game road trip.
Mm-hmm.
There was a little bit of lack of focus, maybe, right? They allow an early goal in the first and the second. So the Pittsburgh game, it's the first game back home since the fires. It's the first game back home at the end of a 5-game road trip, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the longest road trip left on the schedule, which was immediately preceded by a 7-game road trip. So, like, in the month of December and January, they've been on the road a lot.
Yeah.
So now it's Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's an odd team in an odd place.
Yes. That's a good way to describe it.
So I don't really know what to expect other than their home record is really good.
Yeah. And I do think that I think you brought it up before the Trevor Lewis 1000th game to Jim Hiller. Like, there's also a risk that the emotion that goes into what this game's going to be can have a negative impact on this team.
Yeah.
It can have a little bit of take your mind off hockey kind of thing again. But like you said, this team is just so good at home. They find ways to win. This Pittsburgh team, in odd places, is a nice way to put it. They're a team that just waived their goalie, who makes whatever similar to what Cal Peterson made when he got waived.
Yeah, but then their other goalie scored a goal and an assist in the same game.
Yeah, that is true. And they still have, they have Sidney Crosby.
Yeah, and Malkin.
Still such a, yeah, exactly. But, not that this is like a scheduled win, but at the same time, I think that you do have to favor the Kings. I mean, just the way they play at home, this Pittsburgh team is inconsistent at best. I think that it'd be hard for me to. I've given up. I've talked to a few people. I've given up trying to predict Kings games because every time I think something's going to happen, the opposite happens. And especially at home, I just assume they're going to win at this point because that seems to be what's happening.
To me, Eastern Conference matchups come down to 2 groups. Are you in the top 5 or are you in the bottom rest?
Yeah. Yep.
And Pittsburgh's in the bottom rest and Florida's in the top 5.
Yep.
So it should be one weird game and one tough game.
Well, and the Florida game will be, Barkov. It'll be really interesting because Jim Hiller's used Quentin Byfield against the other team's top lines a lot recently.
Yeah.
Where we would expect Barkov Kopitar, which is always a fun matchup, but it could be Quentin Byfield versus Alexander Barkov, which would be fascinating to me to watch. And then obviously every time Matthew Tkachuk comes to LA, it's it is fun, is what I will say. Especially if you're a neutral observer, maybe less so if you're a Kings fan.
It'll be less emotionally volatile than it has been in previous matchups.
Yes.
But yeah, that's an interesting point about the Byfield thing because, yeah, he has been out there. Obviously, he was against McDavid and Draisaitl against Edmonton. and he was against, was it Kucherov? I
Yeah,
thought
Kucherov and
against
Point in
Tampa.
Tampa, and then the
Yeah,
Shifley line, which is the
yeah,
statistically the best line in hockey against
and
Winnipeg.
he's gotten praise from all over the place for his defensive play, and he and
Yeah.
Fogel obviously make a great combo, and they've put Jeannot back on that line.
Hmm.
More to do with injuries than anything else, I think.
Yeah.
Which is another angle of this is we don't know
As,
when Alex Laferriere will come back.
yep. Yep. I'll just have to say that
Yeah,
I mean, that could make a huge difference in this coming up week.
it very well could. Then after their two quick games at home, they go back on the road
Yeah.
for a 4 game road trip, I think. And then, nope, it's another 5 game road trip. Goodness gracious. I think March is basically all home games, if I'm not
Yeah, that makes
mistaken.
sense.
They've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 road games in March, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 home games. All right.
Yeah.
Anyway, Columbus. I don't know what to make of Columbus on any level. Every time, and it's the whole Eastern Conference. Every
Yep.
time I look up, a different team that I presumed would be out of it is now Montrealing their way through a couple wins, or Ottawa or Columbus, for example. I think Columbus is
Yeah.
in that final. Well, yeah, Ottawa, Columbus, Montreal, hanging in there. New York on their way down, except that they're 6-1-3 in their last 10. Boston 3-5-2 in their last 10. Pittsburgh 2-5. So it's like there are some teams that are struggling, but the rest of them, like I said, every time I think there's some team that's done and cooked, Montreal and Columbus both 7-2-1. So I don't know. Is Columbus good?
I mean, I think they're kind of out of nowhere. The top end of their lineup has just been absurd. Zach Werenski is
Yeah.
going to end up with Norris votes probably. Kirill Marchenko has just been fantastic for them. The thing you can get at their goalies, their goaltending has not been stellar, we'll say, this year.
There is that stat that has been bouncing around as I try and find the screen grab of it on my phone. I don't think I have it anymore.
Oh,
Uh,
Marchenko with the difference. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah, it's
insane. They're
plus
they're so
53 or
good.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, it's absurd with him
I
on the ice.
was
It's
putting
insane.
together a daily fantasy lineup the other day, and I was realizing that I had made the mistake of just investing in 2 or 3 really expensive top, and I just went, oh, whatever. And I put Kirill Marchenko in. I was like, listen, the guy obviously is doing something right. Um, it paid off. So
Yeah,
bravo to him,
I think
bravo to me.
it'll be the depth in that game, as it so often is for this Kings team. Is can whether it's Byfield or Deneau plus the Kopitar line, can they saw off the top end of that lineup, and then what can your depth do outside of that? I think is going to be the big determining factor there.
Yeah. It's going to be a fascinating end of the month. I over the course of the season, a lot of people said, okay, come talk to me in January,
Yeah.
we're talking about the Kings' success and whatnot. And well, okay, we're more than halfway through January. And listen, lots of road games and everything. And obviously the road record is not as good as the home record, but the road record is holding steady.
Yeah.
And you mix in 2 home wins, and you're 4, 4-4 in January, if I'm doing my math right. No, 4-3.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
Sounds
like,
right.
okay.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about?
It'll also be fascinating if the offense continues to struggle. We know Jim Hiller likes to think outside the box and likes to shuffle things. Is what, you know, if we get another 3 games where the offense isn't really going, what do the line combinations look like this time next week? Like it could be drastically different.
Yeah, I would be really curious to know what the offensive output is based on who scores the first goal of the game.
Mm.
Because when the Kings score first, like they did, they scored first against Vancouver, right? Yeah, it was
Yeah,
3 to
yeah.
3. It's very easy if you get a lead to then do the Kingsy thing,
Yep.
shut down the other team. It's a lot harder, against Seattle. It was 30 seconds into the game, you're down 1-0.
Yeah.
You fight and you claw your way back to one, and they score, and now it's 2-1, and you're like, you claw and scratch and fight your way back 2-2, and then they score right to the second. You're like, all right, you're constantly fighting. So I'd be really curious. I'm not going to do it because who can be bothered? But I'd love for somebody listening to go back and look and see how many games the Kings score a bunch of goals in where they score first. Because I've been tracking what's their record when they score X amount of
3 or
goals.
more. Yeah.
Yeah, which is 21-0-2, by the way. Which is, it's so funny to me that like I love that stat mainly because it's 21-0-2.
Right.
But the reality is those two could just as easily have been regulation losses. They just
Yeah.
happen not to be. But 21-2-0 is nowhere near as impressive as 21-0. It's just a total like that Seattle game or not Seattle game, the Ottawa game,
Yeah.
back in
Oh,
October.
yeah.
Like
That's right.
there's no way that I have any faith that that 8-7 game, is any sort of like reflection of anything meaningful. But I'll still point to that 21-0-2 stat and go, this is who they are. This is who they are. And it's like, yeah, but one of those games was just a chaotic nightmare. Anyway, Austin Stanovich, anything you want to talk about the Kings before I let you go?
No, I think we covered it.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you for joining me. Tell people where they can find your work.
They can find me on Twitter at astanovich68 or on the Sporting Tribune.
All right. Thank you for joining me, Austin. I will talk to you soon. Thanks for listening, Kings fans. We'll talk to you soon.